涼しくなったかね。
Sinner who has found grace at the foot of the cross, rejoice in your lowliness, your humiliation. Rejoice that Jesus has found you there. That's the perspective of divine wisdom. That's the wisdom that you and I need if we're going to navigate the spiritual tests and the seasons of trial. The hard truth for each one of us here is simply this: we are either going through trial at the present time, or we are needing to prepare ourselves for trials that are just around the corner. We may have seasons of reprieve and enjoy that if that is your season right now, but we all face trials of different kinds in differing seasons of life. How do we navigate those as believers? Well, James says we count it as joy. All of it joy. Because we know that our loving God is using our trials, uses them, never wastes them, so that we may become steadfast, perfect, complete in glory. We count it joy and we ask for wisdom, the wisdom that only God can give, the wisdom that will enable us to live through trial and make sense of trial. It may be, I have no idea, it may be that you have joined us here today because you are going through something and you just don't know how to face it. You've encountered a situation and it's blindsided you and you had nowhere else to go, and you're among us today, you're listening today because you needed something. You needed some way through this, some hope and some help. And if that's you, as we close, let me just say to you, the place to begin, the place to find hope and help is to come to Jesus by faith and to enter into relationship with Him. Believers can have confidence that the Lord will use every trial and provide wisdom to navigate every trial. And if you want that help and you want that assurance for yourself personally, you need to begin by placing your trust in Jesus. You need to come to Him by faith. He gave His life at the cross of Calvary to pay the price of your sin and to welcome you into relationship with Him. And that's the place to begin, by putting your trust in the one who loves you and who will guide you and keep you through all the ups and downs, if you will but trust Him. Will you turn to Him? Will you trust Him today?
Jonathan Griffiths here on Encounter the Truth, wrapping up our message, How to Become Steadfast and Wise. A look today at the first 11 verses of James chapter 1. And if you missed any part of today's broadcast, or you want to go back and listen again, you can do that at the website, encounterthetruth.org. Well, Encounter the Truth is listener supported. That's exactly what it sounds like. We're able to be on this station because of your generosity. And as you give a gift of any amount, we want to say thank you by sending you a book called The Final Lap. It's all about navigating the transitions of later life. And Jonathan, who do you think is really going to benefit from reading this book?
Well, this book is helping us to think biblically about a number of key transitions in later life. So it helps us think through how to move as believers from the world of work to the world of retirement, then from the time of independency to the time of dependency, and then ultimately from life to death as we approach the finishing line. And for anyone who is in the midst of any of those transitions, in those later stages, those later decades of life, I think this book will be pure gold. There aren't many books actually in the Christian marketplace that help us think biblically about these seasons of life, but we need to be ready for them and we need to think about them, and we need help to navigate them well. But there will be others who are supporting parents and grandparents who are perhaps caregivers who need to have a biblical framework and some real encouragement as well for thinking through these things properly and from a biblical perspective. And John is a trusted teacher, a Christian ethicist, a medical doctor as well, and his wisdom is tremendously helpful. I know many have benefited from his teaching over the years, and I'm thrilled that this book is available and that we are able to make it available to listeners here on Encounter the Truth.
Well, the book is called The Final Lap, written by John Wyatt. Our thank you gift to you as you financially support Encounter the Truth with a gift of any amount this month. You can give online at encounterthetruth.org, or when you call 1-833-99-TRUTH. That's 1-833-998-7884, or encounterthetruth.org. You can also write us at Encounter the Truth, 2176 Prince of Wales Drive, Ottawa, Ontario, K2E0A1. Or in the U.S. at Encounter the Truth, 215 North Arlington Heights Road, number 102, Arlington Heights, Illinois, 60004. For Jonathan Griffiths, I'm Steve Hiller. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us next time.
Jonathan Griffiths in Encounter the Truth every morning at 9 o'clock here on KAAM. How to become steadfast and wise from James chapter 1. EncounterTheTruth.org, the ministry website. Again, that's EncounterTheTruth.org. And the phone number is 833-99-TRUTH. That's 833-99-TRUTH to give to Encounter the Truth. My name's Mark Rivers. It's a joy to have you with us here. Thank you for listening in Frisco. The teaching and talk continues. We'll join Dr. Michael Youssef for leading the way in 30 minutes. But first, it's a message titled Real Prophets. Ronald Eldart and Born to Win is next.
With today's Dr. Dodson Minute, here's Dr. James Dodson.
Do you want to see what kind of men and women your children will grow up to be? Take a look in the mirror. A poem by Herbert Parker sums it up best. To get his goodnight kiss he stood beside my chair one night and raised an eager face to me, a face with love alight. And as I gathered in my arms the son God gave to me, I thanked the lad for being good and hoped he'd always be. His little arms crept round my neck, and then I heard him say 4 simple words I can't forget, 4 words that made me pray. They turned a mirror on my soul, on secrets no one knew. They startled me, I hear them yet. He said, I'll be like you. Do you still think what you do as a mother or father doesn't really matter? It does. Believe me, it does.
For more information, visit drdodsonminute.org.
What is the David Smith experience?
Verse 23 in Romans 4 says this. It says this, now, this wonderful truth that God declared him to be righteous wasn't for Abraham's benefit. Verse 24. It was for us too, assuring us that God will also declare us to be righteous if we believe in God who brought Jesus our Lord back from the dead.
The David Smith experience at 1:30 p.m. Weekdays on 770 KAAM.
No doubt Jacob knew the prophecy that had been given even before he was born, that one brother would be greater than the other, and one would serve the other, and he wanted to be the greater one. He wanted to be the one who would inherit the covenant promises of Almighty God. And you see that quality in Jacob for the rest of his life.
That's Messianic Perspectives with Dr. Gary Hedrick. Weekday mornings at 7:15 on 770 KAAM.
This is a test of the emergency alert system.
Are you looking for more in this world? Are you ready for something bigger? Then we are looking for you. The big-hearted, the bold, the messy and the gutsy, the teachers, the growers, the builders, the skilled, the sharers, the change makers. We need you. We are the Peace Corps. In more than 60 countries, we go all in and all out. We are volunteers, partners, communities, working together, living together, bringing our experience, passion, and joy to building a better world together. From tackling climate change in Mexico to keeping kids healthy in Kenya, from sustainable farming in the Philippines to education in Kosovo. We learn more, give more, share freely, and serve boldly. Are you ready to tackle the tough stuff, to go the distance to make a difference? Then we have a place where you belong. Join us at peacecorps.gov.
Life is full of balance, but if you are one of the millions of people affected by dizziness, vertigo, and imbalance, finding your footing isn't as easy as it seems. These conditions disrupt daily life and rob people of their independence. They are often misdiagnosed by healthcare providers, and some people are told that their symptoms are all in their head, or that they are just due to stress. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Do you often feel dizzy and foggy-headed? Do you reach out for the wall to keep yourself from falling over? Do you experience a constant ringing in your ears? If you answered yes, you might have a problem with your inner ear. But liferebalanced.org or call 800-837-8428 to learn how you can get better. Again, that's 800-837-8428. Sponsored by the Vestibular Disorders Association.
The CEM Network is pleased to present Ronald L. Dart and Born to Win. If you've ever settled down to read the Old Testament prophets, and as you read you haven't found anything that affects the way you live your life, you're reading the prophets all wrong. I have said that there are only two reasons why God would ever tell us anything about the future. I mean, why should he? What right do we have to know what's going to happen tomorrow? But he does tell us. Why? One, so we can do something about it. We can change our lives. Or maybe we can run for our lives, as the case may be. Maybe we can even change the outcome. And two, so we can understand events as they happen and see God's hand in history. He has a point whenever he sends a prophet along. Now, real prophets don't make comfortable reading. In fact, they can be depressing at times. But there's a short passage in the book of Ecclesiastes where wise old Solomon said, "It's better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting." It's a whole lot better to go to a funeral than to go to a comedy club. For the funeral is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. Sorrow is better than laughter. Now, that would be hard to see, but listen to how he puts it. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the countenance, the heart is made better. In one of his proverbs, he says, "Keep your heart with all diligence, because out of it are the issues of life." There's a lot of tragedy in the prophets, a lot of death and destruction, a lot of fear, a lot of people hiding out in rocks and caves. But you know, in spite of all the tragedy, it is a place where the heart is made better. I feel sorry for those people who spend all their time in the prophets trying to outline the future. I'd give a nickel for every time I've seen someone's chart, sometimes pages and pages of charts with lines going everywhere and dates and times and figures put upon those charts. I feel sorry for people who approach the prophets like that. Because the purpose is not to give you the ability to predict future events and outcomes. It's something entirely different. I feel sorry for people who do that because when they're doing all that work, they're missing the message of the prophecy. And what's really critical about it, you can do all that work, and you can put all those charts together, and you can line it all out and have everything documented and footnoted so that anybody can prove exactly what you say. Your charts are right. And then everything can be changed. Paul, in his beautiful 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, said, "Love never fails, but whether they are prophecies, they shall fail." Now, I know that we like to think that when God says something's going to happen, it's going to happen. But the Bible makes it very clear that that's not necessarily so. You can have it all worked out, and then God can change it. You doubt that? Well, go back and read the book of Jonah again. I don't know where I would go in the Bible to find a more definitive prophecy. I don't know where I'd go in the Bible to find a more unqualified prophecy. One, he says very specifically not only what's going to happen, but when. He comes walking into the city of Nineveh and says, "Yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown." Well, 41 days later, Nineveh was still there. The prophecy failed. Why did it fail? Well, if you read the story, you'll learn it failed because the men of Nineveh repented in sackcloth and ashes. They even made their animals fast and put sackcloth and ashes all over their animals. We're all repenting, right down to the dogs and cats, they said. And God says, well, look at that. And he changed the prophecy. But if you miss the point, if you miss the message of the prophecy while you're working out all the details, you can wind up missing everything. Mostly, I feel sorry for those who are preoccupied with prediction because they miss the life-changing message of the prophets. For in fact, these men can change your life. Take Jeremiah, for example. In his 17th chapter, he starts off with an interesting little challenge. He says, "Thus saith the Lord, cursed be the man that trusts in man, who makes flesh his arm, and whose heart departs from the Lord." Now, I don't think he means by that it's wrong for you to trust the bus driver to go where he's supposed to go, because we all live our lives daily with a certain amount of trust. What he's doing is drawing the contrast between trusting in man as opposed to trusting in God, putting your trust that way. And in history, this came at a time when Israel was making military alliances to fight off their enemies instead of trusting God. They'd go down to the Egyptians and make a treaty instead of trusting God to fend off the Assyrians from the north. And the result, it got them in an awful lot of trouble. Now, I would say, as I read along through that, cursed is the man who trusts in man and makes flesh his arm, tells me that, I don't really need to be trusting man. I don't need to trust my government. I don't need to trust myself, because in fact, no one will deceive me quicker than I will. God said, "Cursed is the man that trusts in man. He'll be like the heath in the desert and shall not see when good comes. He'll inhabit the parched places in the wilderness, in a salt land not inhabited, a place where nothing grows." It makes sense in any age to any man. Why trust man when God is your help? In verse 7, Jeremiah continues, "Blessed is the man that trusts in the Lord, and whose hope the Lord is. He shall be like a tree planted by the waters, that spreads out her roots by the river, and shall not see when heat comes. Her leaf shall be green, and shall not be careful in the year of drought, neither shall cease from yielding fruit, year in, year out." The message contained in this is that the natural result of trusting God is that your life will work. It doesn't require God to do anything special if you are planted in the right place. You plant a tree in the wrong place, you're going to work your tail off to get anything off that tree at all. You're going to have to water it when it's dry. You're going to have to work like a dog and dig around it and fertilize it and do everything you can. Plant that tree in the right place, and you won't have all that much to do at all. That's what this is about. And when he says, "Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord," he's talking about a man whose trust is planted in the right place. In other words, he trusts God, he lives his life according to God's law and God's instructions, and consequently, things work. In a way, the best argument for trusting God is it works better. It works a lot better than the alternative of trusting in man. In verse 9, Jeremiah says something very provocative and something every one of us ought to take careful heed to. He said, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, the Lord, search the heart. I try the reins, even to give to every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings." And so I conclude from this verse that one of the men I can't trust is me. Because when it says the heart of a man is deceitful above all things, he's talking to me. When he says the heart is desperately wicked, he's talking to me. Among all the liars in the world, there is no greater fool than the man who lies to himself. But in a sense, that's where most lies start. We lie to ourselves, we convince ourselves of our story, then we go out and we tell the lie to others. It's very hard for a man to be honest. It's hard for him to be honest with himself first. Do you see what I mean about reading the prophets for how they affect your life? How they affect the way you think? Because in many aspects, what the prophets really do is they change your worldview. They change your perspective. They change the way you look at things. And as a consequence, they change your life for the better. But if you're chasing days and months and times and years and making charts of when this is going to happen and trying to predict the future, all you're doing is playing the fool. Jeremiah continued in verse 11 to say, "As the partridge sits on eggs that don't hatch, so is he that gets riches, and not by right, shall leave them in the midst of his days, and at the end shall be a fool." Again, gathering of riches seems to be a very high priority in our world. Got to have plenty of money. It's not the gaining of wealth, though, that is wrong as such. It's when you cut corners. It's when you cheat. It's when you lie to gain wealth. And when you gain wealth, not by right, you will lose it all in the end and be a fool. In verse 12, Jeremiah continues, a glorious, high throne from the beginning is the place of our sanctuary. O Lord, the hope of Israel, all that forsake you shall be ashamed. And they that depart from me, says God, shall be written in the earth, because they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living waters. Heal me, O Lord, and I shall be healed. Save me, and I shall be saved. For you are my praise. So you see, prophecy is not merely a telling of the future. It's a call for a changed life. I'll be back with more.
A prophet called Ezekiel was commissioned as a watchman to Israel, but his prophecies ring as true today as they did in ancient times. To understand these prophecies, write or call for a free program titled Ezekiel and the Watchman. Write to Born to Win, Post Office Box 560, White House, Texas 75791, or call toll free 1-888-BIBLE-44.
Sometimes reading prophecy can be, well, frightening and scary. Take Isaiah 5 and verse 20 just as an example. Isaiah says, woe to them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Elsewhere, one of the prophets says, woe to them for their turning of things upside down. It's really strange sometimes how people get things turned around, and things that are evil, they decide, well, that's good. And things that are good, well, that's evil. And darkness becomes light. Light becomes darkness. It's a complete perversion of any kind of standards of right and wrong. Then he says, woe to them that are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight. Woe to them that are mighty to drink wine and men of strength to mingle strong drink. You know, there's drinking, and then there's drinking, and there's some people who are mighty to drink. I mean, it's manly and macho and big stuff to drink. You know, these are men who boast themselves as hard, two-fisted drinkers. They are stupid. They're destroying themselves, destroying their lives, and all too often they destroy other people's lives on the road. So what's going to happen to people who are wise in their own eyes? Smart alecks. What's going to happen to people who are mighty to drink wine, who really go after it two-fistedly? What's going to happen to people who turn things that are good into things that are evil? He says in verse 24, therefore as the fire devours the stubble and flame consumes the chaff, so their root shall be rottenness, and their blossom shall go up as dust. Why? Because they have cast away the law of the Lord of hosts and despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. Now that's interesting. In the process of abandoning standards, you ruin your life. You become dried out, desiccated, easily burned, and become rotten at the root, and the blossom just fragments and blows away like the dust. The image this presents to my mind is not so much one of God coming down in great wrath and smashing everybody and putting a flamethrower to us. What it really says to me is that the abandonment of the Word of God, the abandonment of His law as a definition of right and wrong, is going to ruin your life. He doesn't have to lift a finger. It's the natural result of the things that you do. They're going to dry you out, make you like a plant in the desert, cause you to be burned, and finally blown away like so many ashes. It's the natural result of turning your back on standards of right and wrong. But it doesn't have to work that way for you. Prophecy is given so you can change the outcome for you. You may not personally be able to change it for everybody, but at least you can change the outcome for yourself. And it happens by giving attention to the law of God and respecting the word of the Holy One of Israel. Hosea takes the whole thing a step further. In his 4th chapter, he says, "Hear the word of the Lord, you children of Israel, for the Lord has a controversy with the inhabitants of the land." Now, why would God have a controversy with us? Well, here's what he says. Because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out, and blood touches blood. The imagery is of 2 dead bodies lying in the street, and the blood from one murder running into the blood from another murder. Sometimes these prophets get awfully close to the bone of our own society. And this is the kind of a world you get when you cast away the law of the Lord of hosts. It's not that God, I mean, he is going to get angry and he will punish, but that's not the point. The point is that in casting away the law of the Lord, you get this kind of a world. There are no standards. Children grow up, come through our school system, come out of our homes and go out to college, and they don't know the difference between right and wrong when they get there. Everything is subjective. Well, we have to consider people's origins and their culture and their background, and we can no longer stand up and say, this is a sin. This is wrong. This is going to hurt you, and it's going to hurt other people around you. Hosea continues in verse 3 to say, "Therefore shall the land mourn, and everyone that dwells in it shall languish, with the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven, and the fish of the sea shall all be taken away." You're going to ruin the environment. You're just going to wreck everything because of greed, because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God, because of the swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery. The whole thing speaks of a complete loss of a sense of right and wrong. Yet, he said in verse 4, "Let no man strive nor reprove another. For your people are like they that strive with the priest." They just want to argue with somebody all the time. Stop the argument. Forget the argument. It isn't going to help you. "Therefore you're going to fall in the day, and the prophet shall fall with you in the night, and I will destroy your mouth." My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. You just don't know. I mean, there has never been a time in history when people have known more. So how in the world would God say you're destroyed for a lack of knowledge? Well, all right, take your poll and go around people and find out how much they know about God. Find out how much they know about the law of God. Find out if they really believe that the law of God is rooted in the nature of things, or if, well, that's just something that some old Israelites put together to keep everybody from having a good time. Because they don't know God, because they don't know his law, my people, he says, are destroyed. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you. Those are chilling words. I told you sometimes it can be scary reading the prophets. The reason why we don't have the knowledge of God is not because it isn't available. It's not because we can't find it. It's because we have rejected it. Then he says, "Seeing you have forgotten the law of your God, I will also forget your children." Well, wait a minute now. It's not the children's fault that the parents have forgotten the law of God, is it? No. It's not the children's fault that the parents are liars and cheats and thieves and adulterers, is it? Why is God going to abandon our children? Oh, it's not that. Oh, no, you misunderstand. Because you have forgotten the law of God, your children don't know it. They don't know who God is. They don't know where to find him. They don't know where to go look for him. And as a consequence, they are forgotten. It's a consequence, folks, not an active rejection by God in that sense. This is really not hard to figure. When you forget God, you leave your children with no moral compass. This isn't a threat from God, really. It's a predictable result of a life choice. As they were increased, he said in verse 7, so they sinned against me. Therefore I will change their glory into shame. What a statement. the more prosperous you've gotten, the more you have forgotten me. I think it really works that way. Because by and large, when we are poor, and when we are enslaved, and when our lives aren't working, that's when we go about looking for God. I've always loved the spirituals that grew out of slavery of black people in this country. As simple as those people were, their songs had a depth. They are truly profound theologically and of course emotionally as well. I wonder why? Well, it's because they were poor and they were slaves and they looked to God because God was the only place they could look for any hope. And they really identified with Israel of old because Israel of old were slaves. And that's why they wrote songs like Go Down Moses, Tell Old Pharaoh, Let My People Go. Because like Israel was released from slavery, so they yearned to be released. And the rest of us, we get richer. And as we get richer, we sin against God. They eat up the sin of my people, Hosea said, and they set their heart on their iniquity. And there shall be like people like priests, and I will punish them for their ways, and I will reward them for their doings. For they shall eat and not have enough. They'll commit whoredom, but they won't increase, because they have left off to listen to God. Whoredom, wine, and new wine take away the heart. And you might as well add drugs. My people ask counsel at their stocks, and their staff declares to them they're going to every kind of fortune teller that they can find to try to find out something about the future. But the spirit of whoredoms, he says, has caused them to err, and they've gone a-whoring from under their God. They sacrifice upon the tops of mountains and burn incense on the hills under oaks and poplars and elms. Why? Because the shadow is good. Therefore your daughters shall commit whoredom, and your spouses shall commit adultery. Why is all that going to happen? Because the people have rejected the knowledge of God. It's that simple. I'll be right back.
For a free copy of this radio program that you can share with friends and others, write or call this week only and request the program titled Real Prophets, number 11. Write to Born to Win, Post Office Box 560, White House, Texas 75791.